So thank you so much. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to the Global Governance students on behalf of the President of the University of Rome Tor Vergata, but also good morning to the students of the Master of Science from the Economics faculty, from the Engineering faculty, and the students of our cousin program, the Bachelor in Economics and Business Administration here still at Tor Vergata University. Today is a special day in our series on Israeli lessons on institutional benchmarking. We have the honor and privilege to have Anya Eldan today with us. She's Vice President of the Innovation Authority in Israel. She manages there the startup division, which funds over 400 startups annually through programs that she will talk about, such as a seed fund, technological incubators, open innovation labs. She also leads the National Bioconvergence Strategy, which is the future of health tech, integrating biology and engineering, and she's responsible for human capital programs and impact activity. She holds an MBA and a bachelor degree in mathematics from our partner university, Tel Aviv University, which is part of our consortium in Venice International University, but also an overseas partner for Tor Vergata. She has 25 years of executive experience in the high-tech industry. And also, you may want to ask her when you have the Q&A, proven experience in public and private fundraising. Before joining the Innovation Authority, Anya managed companies in the field of digital healthcare, a topic which is kind of important also for global governance here, and was a managing partner in the Platinum Venture Capital Fund. So without further ado, we have until I believe 11:30. So Anya, we will leave space in the end for Q&A, but let me say on behalf of all the global governance students, how honored we are of your presence here. We thank obviously the Israel Embassy for setting up these meetings, and I leave you without further ado the word and the slides.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here, even if it's virtual. And I hope you all keep healthy and able to study through this strange new media. So I will tell you a little bit about Israeli innovation ecosystem, about the government involvement, and a little bit what we did through COVID. Some of it may be, this is not a presentation that was built for you. It's a presentation that we do all the time to industries, to other governments. So if you feel you want me to explain some terms, Professor Piga, please let me know. And if you guys have questions or don't understand something as I speak, also please let me know so I can stop. It's not so important to run. It's more important to understand and enjoy. And also, if you ask me a question, it will give me time to drink my tea. So, how many of you have been to Israel? I see one. On my screen, I see two. Anyway, have you heard the term Startup Nation Central? Startup Nation? You know why Israel is called Startup Nation? Somebody wrote a book and the term stuck with us. It's because we have so many startups. So I will talk a little bit about how the government helps create this. And actually, the innovation in Israel started many years ago in the 1896, where the Jewish thinker Herzl, he came with the idea of establishing a state of Israel. And even then, many years ago, he said that the innovation and the technology is actually going to help Israel succeed. This is a little timeline that we put together going from 1896. It took a little while, so the country was established in 1948. The first multinational to open offices in Israel was Motorola in 1969. Until then, There really weren't any multinationals in Israel and not much technology. Our office was called previously the Office of Chief Scientist. It was established in 1971. And I will tell you how it's different now. But that's when the government started looking at science, at technology, and thinking how it can help the economy. 72, 74, Intel opened their first big plant and research facility. IBM opened their big research facility. Big change started in 1993. So you're following, this is taking a while. I always tell people, don't think that it's so easy. It takes a while and you have to keep changing. I think the best quality we have in our agency is that we keep changing all the time. So 1993 is a big change in the policy. And the policy changed to think of R&D, of research and development, as a tool for innovation. So this is when somebody understood that in order for Israeli economy to succeed, we have to move into the technological world, and we have to create an innovative country, innovative industry. And the thinking was, which is not a trivial thinking, that increasing the R&D, increasing investment in R&D is going to create innovation. And at that time, we also established a very well-known program called Yozma. This was a government program, again, by our agency, that created the venture capital industry. So this is a very famous program. The idea was that we gave 12 groups, we gave them 40%, we gave them $8 million. We said, if you can raise $12 million, but also bring an experienced venture capitalist to be partner, you can get our money and you can return it to us whenever you want. And this is an important piece. I will talk about it more. We, as a government, don't want to make money. We don't take upside. We don't make, if we support somebody, we don't want to succeed financially. Our goals are all economic. And economic goals mean we want our money to stimulate the economic growth. I will talk about it. So this Yozma program, 1993, was, I think, a big stepping stone to creating Israel as a successful high-tech country. Our agency was renamed to Israel Innovation Authority in 1916. That's when already I joined. And I will tell you a little bit about how all of this happened. But look at the yellow signs. I think this is an extremely important naming scheme. So in the beginning, in the 70s, we got all those multinationals. Today we have, we're a 9 million, Israel has 9 million citizens, so we're a tiny country. We have about 450 R&D centers by multinational companies. And it all started with Motorola, IBM, Intel, and so forth. So in the beginning, it was just R&D, research and development. All those research and development centers, a lot of Israeli engineers worked at those research centers and learned about industry and technology and so forth. From 1993, we call ourselves the startup nation. That's when new companies, innovative startups started popping up. Now, Israel has more venture capital money per capita and more, as a percentage of more startup companies and more R&D. I will show you. We're looking today, are we going to be a scale-up nation? That's a new name we're trying. So scale-up means, in the beginning, in the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, there were a lot of startups and most of them were sold for technology. So they would invent something, develop it, and then sell the company to a big international company, mostly American, but also others. So it was a startup nation because it only created startups. It didn't create large companies. The idea of scale-up nation is, can we grow some of those companies? Not all of them. We have some 7,000 startups in Israel. Probably not much less than in Italy, but in absolute terms. But not all of them can succeed and not all of them can become large industries. But we hope that some will become large industries. So in the last few years, we've had over 40 unicorns. Do you know what unicorn is? Anybody?
I'll explain, Anya.
Unicorn is very important. You have to know unicorn. You know what a unicorn means? It's this mythological animal, right? With a So unicorn is a high-tech name for a company that is worth more than $1 billion US. That's the definition of unicorn. And worth, it means that either it raised money, it's a private company usually, and it raised money at a valuation of more than $1 billion. So usually it's a big, already a growing company. So 40 unicorns, 40 companies that are scaling up. So they develop their product and they're growing their revenue and they're not selling the technology to somebody else. So this is the history. This is what I mentioned about R&D. So research and development, percentage of research and development as percentage of GDP, gross domestic product. I don't remember your economic. Basically, this is the marker that talks about innovation. So why is having a lot of R&D equal to innovation? It's not equal because a lot of R&D can be also not innovative. So let's think of a country that does a lot of R&D for other people. We used to be like that in the 70s of the last century. Anyway, in our case, we have, even as a very small country, Israel and Korea have been leading the percentage of R&D over the last 5 years, even more probably. And if I showed you a graph of how much R&D we had in the past years, the change happened in the beginning of 1990. So that's when we went from 2.3% from the world average to leading. And all this investment in research and development started because of our agency. So we started getting budget, government budget, to support R&D in order to increase R&D by Israeli companies. So today, Israeli high-tech is very strong part of the economy. Even though only 9% of employees work in high-tech, it is 13% of the gross domestic product, and it's 46% of total export. By the way, about 10% of that is Intel. So Intel has large plants in Israel. In addition to their R&D centers, they also manufacture in Israel. With the government support, they build those plants, and they're a huge percent of R&D. So if you heard that Intel is going through some turmoil, you're familiar with Intel, right? Intel inside of all of our computers. So Intel is going through interesting times, and we're following it very closely. Now you know why. So as I said, the industry in Israel is maturing. Unicorns, you already know that. This is an old slide. This 2020, we already have over 40 unicorns. But we still have quite a lot of challenges. And we're the government agency responsible for this. We're looking at those challenges. So human resources is one problem. We generate about 9,000 engineers and data scientists and computer professionals every year. The industry needs much more. So we've been implementing, and Israel is not a very open society, so we cannot bring engineers from abroad. So we've been putting a lot of effort in training, in increasing the education in those fields, in helping unrepresented unrepresented population to join the high tech. So for example, women, more than half of the population, much less than half of the workforce in high tech, around 25, 30, and that's counting everything. So here I think we have a lot of women. I'm taking a quick look. At least half women, right? Maybe more.
More.
More. Yeah, they're all at the further pages on my screen. Yeah, more women, so great. So what happens is a lot of women are very good in math in high school, and then less girls go to study exact sciences. And even from those who graduate, not everybody joins the industry. And even those who join the industry not necessarily continue. So there are a lot of challenges. But there are also other challenges. For example, the Arab population, which is about 20% of the country, not represented. We've been putting a lot of effort in that, and there is a huge growth. So in the last couple of years, there's a huge growth of Arab engineers entering the high tech and so forth. I will not talk about ease of business. While Israel leads in a lot of parameters like innovation and innovation ecosystem and startup and venture capital, when it comes to ease of business, we are not on the first page. So it's not so easy, unfortunately, to do business in Israel. And again, this is not all of it is part of our responsibility, but we're trying to make some changes. So why is government involved in high tech? So high tech is successful, as you can hear, it's growing. You understand already that creating more engineers is probably an important part, and that's definitely government part to help. But what else? And we've been involved in helping high tech for so many years. So I can tell you 3 main areas that we're working in. And I will give you some tools, but just to understand. The first and most important part is act upon market failures. So you study economics, you already probably heard. Market failure is something, do you want to define it, Professor Piga? What is market failure?
I have to handle another thing. Go ahead, please, Anya.
Okay. So market failure is when the free market, free economy is not solving the problems. So if you think, okay, there is a demand, more will be manufactured and the price will go down, market failure is when it's not happening. Yeah. So I'll give you some examples of market failures that we address. Another thing is removing barriers. So for example, I'll give you an example of a barrier. You know, governments are regulators. So for example, if there is a new food, a company is inventing new food, they cannot just start selling it to you, right? They have to go through a regulation process. They have to apply. In our case, it's Food Administration and Ministry of Health. They have to apply, they have to prove safety, and only after they get approval, they can sell you food, right? So this regulation process can be very, very complicated. In some cases, it's so long that it's not worth even developing a new food product. It's the same with drugs. And I'm sure all of you were following the COVID-19 vaccines. And what you heard, the major thing about this vaccine is that it came to the market in less than a year, right? Usually it takes 3 to 5 years to bring a drug to the market or a vaccine. And a lot of people think that because it came through so quickly that maybe it wasn't tested enough. There's a lot of discussions on Facebook about, oh, you guys probably don't look at Facebook, it's the old people media, but wherever you are, there's a lot of discussion about how this is not tested, this vaccine. In fact, what happened was they went through the whole process. They had over 44,000 people who participate in a clinical trial, which is a lot. And they went through every process required by the regulation. So how come it was so quick? Very simple, because the regulator, in this case, Food and Drug Administration, were just very fast. So if usually you submit something and the regulator has 6 months to reply, and mostly they will reply at the last week, here they replied within a week. So the minute the regulator is fast, it doesn't mean they compromise on quality, it just means that they give priority and they work hard to give you a result very quickly. So removing barriers is helping, for example, to make the regulation easier. It helps stimulate the economy. And the last piece that governments have to deal with when they talk about innovation and high tech is creating new growth engines. When you look at new areas, new markets, for example, let's think about green economy, let's think about alternative fuels. We all understand that having fuel that is not polluting, let's say solar or wind energy, is better for the planet, it's better for our lives, it's better, right? So why is it taking forever? Why is it taking so long? And why is it only now, let's say Europe is probably leading this change? I was in Denmark a couple of years ago. They have over 60% of their fuel at that time was green. So it's a government role to help this happen, because private sector, you know, if you're an oil company, you really don't have a lot of interest in solar energy and so forth. So some things are not happening without government intervention. I will say a few words about innovation authority. So we do those 3 things that I showed you about: look at market failures, try to remove barriers, and stimulate future growth engines, technological growth engine. Our budget is around $500 million. Last year, it was much bigger because due to the COVID, we got additional budgets. We have a very unique approach to supporting. So what we do, basically, we provide loans. So if you're a startup company, or actually if you're a big company, or if you are applied researcher in university, you can come to us with a proposal and we decide to give you money or not. That's our main tool for stimulating economy. But our tools are a little different than maybe other countries. So first of all, we provide conditional loans. Conditional loans mean that you don't have to return the money if the startup failed. Or even if you're a big company and you want to start a new innovative product, if it doesn't succeed, you don't have to pay us back. If it succeeds, we get our money back through royalty of sales. We don't take upside, so we don't take profit. We don't take equity in the company. We don't sit on company managing boards. We just provide the loan and hope that the company will succeed. So how do we decide when to give? So it says here we had in 1919 3,000 proposals. We approved about 40%. This year we had about 4,000 proposals in 2020 because of COVID, and approved a little more. So how do we decide when to give money? We have a very unique criteria, and it's very strange, and a lot of governments don't understand us. Our criteria is very simple. We want to support only the risky project. So let's say cyber is very popular in Israel. Israel has a lot of cyber companies, lots of cyber money. Is the government going to support cyber? No. So we only try to concentrate on those areas where our support is needed, where the risk is very high. And why is that? Because we want to complement the private sector. This is a slide that shows what I just said. We want to complement the private sector. So if you look here, let's say at software, 32% of the private venture money goes into software. You see that government participation is only 14%. Healthcare and medicine, much less private investment, much more government investment. So our decision is always complementary to the private market, actually investing against the private trend. We're trying to, again, help where help is needed. Some example of market failures. So very early stage companies, seed stage companies, that's a very difficult raising capital. Why? Because the risk is so high. So out of every startup that is being established because somebody had an idea, the chances of it succeeding are pretty low. So investors want to make money. They want to invest in companies where the risk is reduced. So they don't want to go in very early. Growth, as I said, in Israel, it's much easier to sell the startup company than to grow it. So we had to overcome a lot of failures in order to help companies grow. This year, we created two new funding mechanisms that help growing companies to get access to capital easier to address this problem. And it's an Israeli problem because our companies are not used to growing in Israel. They're used to being sold. We talked about human capital, HR. Another issue that's very, very difficult is technology transfer from the universities. You know, a lot of innovation comes out of universities. A lot of researchers in universities will research new ideas. Usually when we say basic science, it's the ideas that researcher wants to study, wants to research. Usually they have nothing to do with real world. It's something that researcher wants to know. So how does the solar system work? Basic science. At some point, somebody may think, okay, I have this great invention. What is the practical thing that can be created out of it? So that's when we go to applied research. Applied research means taking basic research, taking some invention, some understanding of how the universe is working, and creating something useful for the actual society. Yeah. So if somebody was researching mRNA mechanism, how the cells and antibodies work in our body, then when comes COVID, some applied scientists said, hey, maybe this mechanism can help fight viruses, okay? So basic research as opposed to applied research. Once you have successful applied research, you have to create companies, or you have to move it into the industry. That's the process that we call technology transfer. Technology transfer from universities into the industry is an extremely complicated problem because the people who invented or did the research, they're academics. Usually they're not the ones who will establish and run the company. So you have to find another team. You have to find somebody who can take this academic idea and see how to create product that has market. Very difficult program. again, market failure, and we deal with that. Okay, few words about COVID, because we cannot do any lecture without it, without talking about it. So Israeli high-tech, as I said, is pretty strong. We had comparatively less last year. One of the biggest problems is less startups were established and less startups were funded, because during the crisis, investors prefer to support their existing companies and not to go and invest in new companies. We had problems with companies who are supposed to grow. So for example, if you're developing a medical product and you were just starting doing clinical trials in hospitals, guess what? Hospitals were busy doing other things during 2020. So a lot of clinical research stopped. A lot of clinical trials stopped. A lot of supply chain disappeared. So, for example, today our airport is closed. Nothing comes in. So the supply chain is becoming problematic. So getting stuff from abroad, yeah. For example, I just ordered some balsamic vinegar from Modena. It's not coming. I have to wait. So supply chain is problematic. So a lot of sales stopped because, you know, a lot of companies, their sales process is that they go and meet customers. When you have lockdown, your customers don't want to meet you. We had about 1 million people who were let go or went on a forced vacation during the last year. 1 million is a huge amount out of a 9 million population. So a large amount of, we never had unemployment. Before the COVID, Israel had full employment. So everybody who wanted to work had a job. There's always some percentage who are not working because they cannot or they don't want, but anybody who wanted to have, so now we have hundreds of millions of unemployed, and that's another problem. I will not go into everything, just give you an example of how government has to react very quickly. So what we did, the COVID crisis started somewhere in the beginning of March, and in Israel, after it started in Italy. End of March, we published a call for proposals for companies who have ideas to address COVID-related issues. Within 2 weeks, we got 900 proposals. Excuse me. 900 proposals from academic institutions, from startups, from bigger companies. Some were completely crazy proposals. I will give you a couple examples just to enjoy. And some were very serious. Some were developing vaccines, developing diagnostic, developing tools for epidemic research, when somebody is sick, how to find out all the people who were around him and so forth. And some ideas were really crazy. So within 1 month, we supported some, I think, 90 companies with COVID-related programs. We came out with a fast track program where existing companies who had trouble, for example, their sales stopped, their investment stopped, they could apply to us. We supported 200 companies that had a runway problem. Runway is how many months, startups, you know, they don't make money, they spend money. So runway is how many months does a startup have to live. So if I'm a company and I employ 20 people and I have some expenses, let's say I spend $50,000 a month, and I have $1 million in the bank. So how much runway I have? It's $1 million divided by 50,000. So I'm in good shape. But if I have $1 million and I spend 200,000 a month, I have 5 months runway, not good. So this was a very fast program that helped existing companies. I promised some examples. You want some examples about COVID fighting ideas? So my favorite one was a person who thought that drinking tonic water can, you know what tonic water is? So she said drinking tonic water can cure COVID. And she didn't know how, but she thought it was a good idea because, you know, in India, they used tonic to fight malaria. So she thought it was a good idea. And she wanted money to do a trial to give people lots of tonic and see what happens. So we get a lot of those. So that was one. Another one that we really enjoyed was a balloon, sort of like a flying balloon that's gonna come to the window of old people. And the balloon will have a screen, and the screen will show some person, some interaction, and will create interaction with old people through the window, because old people couldn't leave because they were at high risk. So a lot of really great ideas. Some were very funny, some were really good. And some are already making money out of those products. So this is our life. So just looking, I will finish up real quick. Just looking at the future. So especially in times of crisis, you know, the most important thing in the crisis, I forget who said it. Somebody, I will remember in a second, somebody smart said, never waste a good crisis. Does anybody know who said that? I don't remember, but somebody very smart said that. So the most important thing when there is a big crisis, it can be personal in your life, but in this case, we're talking about economic crisis. The biggest thing is how do you use the crisis? So, you know, somebody has an idea, you have to talk to me. Somebody has an idea of a company that is really growing very fast because of the crisis. Come on, guys. Give me an idea of a company you know very well that started growing real fast during the crisis. I'll give you a hint. You're using it as we speak.
You are receiving answers in the chat, huh?
Oh, okay, I don't see the chat.
You want me to tell you what they're writing?
What, people don't talk?
Well, they're used to, I mean, it's our fault. They don't want to, but if you want, they can talk. They say Pfizer.
Okay, everybody saw Zoom, so that's good. Did Pfizer shares go up or down? Who knows?
Well, we saw some jump at the beginning, at least.
Yeah, there was a jump in the beginning, it went down. I don't know where it is now, but.
Then they also say Netflix, hand sanitizer producers, Amukina. You know what Amukina is?
No.
Amukina is this with which we clean our hands, and it is produced in Italy.
Oh, okay.
And at the height of the crisis at the beginning, people could not even find it. So high was the demand for it.
Yes, yes. So that's right. We call it algogel.
Okay, and Albina is saying delivery companies.
Delivery companies is very good. How do you get your food in where you are?
I don't want to speak. Some people, Virginia, take the floor. You said delivery company. Virginia, speak. I don't want to speak myself.
Okay, hello, good morning. I'm sorry, I can't open my video right now.
Okay, just speak. We can hear you very well.
But I was saying about delivery companies also because I know that in Italy it's mandatory for like restaurants to have at least one delivery app installed. Otherwise, you can't go on with the service after 6 p.m. So that's why I was saying delivery companies. I was referring to also the food industry.
Is there a specific delivery company in your area that's really made itself indispensable? So in Israel, it's called Volt, W-O-L-T. It's a Finnish company. We cannot get delivery any other way now.
We
They
have
just took over the country.
Deliveroo, Just Eat. We have some, like 4 or 5 at the moment.
So this is great. And there are others. And you know what happened to a lot of companies? They also changed the way they do business. They became digital. So if we talked about losing sales in the beginning because people could not go. So a lot of companies who were able to do it changed their sales strategy to become digital. And the good thing about it is that created a lot of new jobs. It created new job opportunities for people to do digital marketing, for people to do digital sales, for people to do digital support. I'm not saying it's a good thing or bad thing. So after a few months of 12-hour days on Zoom, I already hate Zoom more than I hate everything else.
There's also people, just to tell you that there's also people like Federico writing from Facebook, okay? So people are answering your questions also.
Great, great. So, yeah, so crisis. So maybe somebody can find out who said never waste a good crisis.
Sir, Madam, it was Karl Popper that said
Karl
this
Popper,
phrase.
right. A British philosopher.
But
right?
people are also saying Churchill, so there's a debate here, okay?
Okay. Usually it's attributed to Churchill, but I think you're right, actually, David. Because Churchill was quoting Karl Popper, probably. Absolutely. Isn't it a great thing? Like when there is a crisis, usually companies downside, they let people go, they reduce the costs. We, for example, don't have any cookies anymore in our offices because we're saving money. But some companies, the really smart ones, are using the crisis to grow. And they're the ones that are gonna be winners. And if any of you want to look back on a previous big crisis, one was in 2008, and huge amount of companies came out of that crisis, that 2-year financial crisis, came out big successes. And if you look at leading Fortune companies, so leading big companies in US, you look at the list today and the list of 2008, and it's like another world. So I'm sure you all know the companies that came out of that crisis: Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and so forth. And a lot of oil companies went down, a lot of entertainment companies went down, and so forth. So during the crisis, you have to look at the future. And we as a government, as you remember, one of our roles is to stimulate future growth. So we're looking at different, I just put some national programs here. So quantum computing, I don't know if you heard about. Quantum is a new technology, actually massive computing technology. It's going to be a basis for everything we do in the future, and probably much faster than we thought, because our world became digital. So we have a national program to increase quantum computing research and infrastructure. We have a new program to increase artificial intelligence. Even though Israel has more artificial intelligence companies per capita than every other country in the world except US, we think that on the infrastructure, especially on the university side, we have some problem. In particular, because all the big companies came, like Amazon, Facebook, Google, came and took the best researchers and paid them huge salaries for them to join the big companies. So there's a lot to do in another big national program, actually, that I'm leading is bioconvergence. It's a future of health tech. It's a convergence of biological sciences and engineering sciences. And we see it happening. I'll give you an example of bioconvergence product. If you think how you take medicine today, so a lot of medicine is taken systemically, right? You swallow something and then it sort of goes around your body and hopefully some of it gets to the right place, yeah? Bioconvergence medicine would be something that goes around your body looking for trouble spots. And if it finds a place that needs some help, it will release some medicine. So this is a maybe similar medicine, but you have movement, you have sensing, you have a release mechanism, you have some energy. How is this device getting the energy? So a lot of issues. So convergence meaning taking different disciplines, different sciences, getting them to work together to create future. And there are a lot of examples. I think I don't know, is this my last slide? I'm just not able to move this. Yeah, I guess it is. Well, we can talk about the transformation. I sort of mentioned a few things about how everything is changing under COVID. We talked about interaction. Here we are on the Zoom instead of meeting. We talked about food delivery. We talked about education, as you all know. And of course, e-commerce. You know, e-commerce jumped more than twice during the last year worldwide, which is amazing. So the acceptance of doing things online. Healthcare is becoming extremely, I don't know what happens where you live, but in Israel, it used to be you have to call to get an appointment with your physician. Then you could make an appointment online. We thought that was a height of innovation. And today you actually have the appointment online because your doctor doesn't really want to meet you. So they are, when you ask for an appointment, they sort of say, why don't we have a video chat first? And then maybe we don't need to meet. So healthcare is changing a lot. So waves of opportunity, back to Karl Popper and to Churchill. Oops. So these are just some slogans, yeah, nothing really important. But I will go through them because I think all of them are really important in what you study and what you will do when you move on with your life. The entrepreneurial spirit, this is not something we can really teach. So you can teach people the dynamics of building a startup. So you need a lawyer, you need an accountant, you need the funding, you need business plan. But being an entrepreneur, taking your hunches, you know what a hunch is? Like an intuition. You have an idea. Most people have an idea and they put them aside. So they tell themselves, it's probably a stupid idea. Somebody probably did it before. I don't really know how to proceed. I don't have the time. A lot of reasons why we have good ideas and we don't pursue them. So now you have an opportunity. The world is changing and you guys are going to be the drivers of this change because you're going to be different people than we were. Learning different ways, you're living different ways. You will have ideas that people like me will not have because we grew up differently. And it says throw away the playbook. Playbook is a name we use for assumptions and models. So usually we say, we know how the customer will react if we do this and this. We know how the market will react. We know how the physician will react if we do provide him with this product. Today, everything is different. So things we thought would be, for example, some people thought that e-commerce is taking slow. So if you're a business, you don't really have to have a website. It's okay. Of course, if you didn't have a website, you're out of business during the last year, right? So you have to really change everything you think about. And there are a lot of opportunities, I'm not sure I know what to say about focus. Focus is a brother of drop. I don't have a clue what they mean by that. Okay. Turning the crisis into opportunity. So this is already not Churchill. We moved to US. We're talking about John Kennedy, but it's still the same idea. So there's danger, there's opportunity. You know what the venture capital is? Venture capital is risk and reward, right? So the more you take risk, the more chance you have of making a lot of money. So most venture capital will be in the middle, right? They will take less risk and they will say, it's okay, I don't need to make gazillions. It's okay if I take less risk, I make more, I make less money, but I will still be financially successful. Why are we looking for disruptive technologies and innovative technologies? Because the more disruptive your idea, it's high risk, right? Because you're betting on something to change in a major way. So the risk is high because maybe it will not change. But the more disruptive your idea, the higher is your reward. So if you were Zoom, and a year ago, I don't even remember if we used Zoom a year ago. I'm not even sure. I think we used Skype. Anybody remember Skype? Like, that's a really old idea, right? So Zoom, somebody there understood the opportunity and they were prepared for the biggest challenge. What's the biggest challenge of Zoom? All of a sudden, 10 times more people are using it everywhere, or 1,000 times more people are using it. So it's a lot of performance issues, a lot of how do you support such a huge growth? A lot of challenges. So the company who was prepared and was willing to run real fast, they won. Or at least I think that Zoom won. I don't know what everybody else thinks. So maybe it's like Facebook. I'm using Facebook for 15 years. I think that's all there is. Then I find out that none of my kids or their friends even have Facebook accounts. They already moved somewhere else. Guys, ask me questions, please.
Thank you so much, Anya.
I'm so tired of talking.
Yes, but they're waiting for you. So now comes the time for questions. And as usual, raise your blue hand. We have half an hour, 33 minutes until the end. So whoever wants to ask first, please go ahead. I see Paolo. Go ahead, Paolo.
Good morning. Thanks very much for your presentation. I'm Paolo Barbanelli at DG1 coming from Italy. And I wanted to ask you about the metaphor of the unicorn that I don't understand. So I would like to ask you for further explanation. Thanks very much.
Okay, so why is unicorn called unicorn? Read on Wikipedia. Okay, so I don't have a clue. Why do we use this term? I think because it's a mythical creature. It's something that, you know, unicorns don't really exist. It's like a mythology. And I think it's something to strive for. But whoever, I'm sure somebody is already on Wikipedia and they can tell us because I don't know. But in terms of high tech, if a company is valued more than $1 billion, we call it a unicorn. Okay.
Cornelius.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. My name is Cornelius. I'm in the 3rd year of global governance and I'm from Germany. And my question concerns Well, first of all, it's a very interesting and or a very impressive journey that Israel underwent to become such an influential startup nation. And my question is concerning the key ingredients, in your opinion, that a country has to provide in order to form an environment for startups to thrive and for new ideas from people from any kind of social class, let's say, to actually thrive and give people the opportunity. You touched upon it a little bit in one of the slides, but what is your opinion? What are the main points that have to be provided? Because not every country is, let's say, as fortunate as Israel currently. But yeah, the ingredients that maybe also other places can learn from Israel in order to create such an environment.
Yeah.
Thank you
Great
very much.
question. Thank you. Great question. And you know, I've been with the government for 6 years, which is a long time, and I've been able to talk to a lot of other governments, and always they ask this question. So I'll start answering with an example, okay? So I'm managing an incubator program. In Israel, incubator is a very unique program. Incubator is really a seed fund that provides early stage funding for new companies. We have quite a few of those. So few countries have learned this model. We're always happy to teach. And so I will not say which country. Probably somebody here is from there. But one country implemented exactly the same model. They took somebody who came from Israel and he advised them on how to build it, and they built the same model. And when I just joined 6 years ago, the government people from that country came to visit to Israel. And I had this discussion with them, how come our incubators are successful and their incubators are not successful? So I said, how many startups do you see every year? And they said, 20, 30. So I said, our incubator sees 300. So if you don't have enough innovation, enough startups, it's very difficult. You know, you need startups at the first floor. You create a lot of new ideas, then some fail, but some go to the next level and so forth. If you don't have a basis of a lot of new ideas, a lot of startups, it's very hard to build such a culture. So it's not just about tools that the government can provide. So of course you need venture capital and you need technology transfer and you need multinationals. I call it the ecosystem approach. In order to create a successful entrepreneurial innovation industry, you need all the pieces of the puzzle. But I think the first piece, and maybe that's what you asked, is how do you encourage innovation? How do you encourage entrepreneurship? So one is encouraging risk-taking. You know, Germany, for example, is an amazing country because a lot of businesses in Germany are family businesses. I think most of the economy, right? There is a German name for it, which I forget, Mittel something. And these businesses are just continue for hundreds of years. That is not Mittelstand, thank you. That is not something that happens in Israel. So if you're a part of this industry and you used to continue family tradition and the owners continue, you know, the same family manages the business for many years, it's very rare for somebody from that group to leave and go do something else because that's a tradition. So changing the tradition is not easy. It's not easy. So you can encourage, you can create programs. Like we have a program where we give something like 60,000 euro to somebody with an idea. You don't have to have a company, you're just private individual, you have an interesting idea, you apply, you can get 60,000 euro to write patent, to do a market trial, to create a prototype. So last year I had 540 applications for this small program. and we approved something like 160. So that's people who have ideas, and you have to make them know that you have some money they can get, and then they come and act on their ideas, as opposed to throwing them away like happens to all of us. So creating a culture that encourages risk-taking is important. Now, why is it happening in Israel? There are a lot of different ideas. So everybody you ask this question will give you a different idea. We call it a pet theory. You know what the pet theory? Everybody has their own theory. So I'll give you mine, okay? Why there are so many entrepreneurs. So our previous president, Mr. Shimon Peres, used to say it's because Israelis are never satisfied, never happy. You see something, you say, this is not good enough, I can do better. So that's his theory. My theory is different. My theory says, you know, we're a very small country geographically, and most of us live very close to our families, and we have a family dinner every Friday night. I don't know if anybody here has a family dinner every week, but we have a family dinner every Friday night. So you meet your whole family. Sometimes you go to your husband's family one Friday night and to your family the next Friday night. But every Friday night we have a family dinner, and all those people meet together, Shabbat, right? All the people meet together, and every week, and you have to find things to talk about. So you finish complaining, and then somebody is a doctor and he talks about problems he had in his work, and he says, I wish I could solve this. And his cousin is sitting there and he's an engineer, and he says, you know what, let me think about it. And here a new startup is born. So my theory is, because we have all those family dinners and we have to get through them somehow without killing each other, we talk a lot about our problems and find solutions. So you're laughing at it. I'm happy. Something else. Who else?
But the Italians have a lot of dinners too, huh? Family dinners. Aoife, did you have a question or not? Because
but you know, you have all this nice wine you drink with your dinner, and then you're just happy. You don't have
we're
problems.
also innovative. Then maybe we have obstacles, but we have a lot of dinners with family. Yeah.
So maybe it's a bad theory.
Yeah.
It's hard to give a serious answer, because you know there are many answers. I'll say a few more words, because
we like yours. Aoife.
Because you know
sorry, Anya, sorry.
don't have a market. You know, that's one thing that helped Israel a lot, because we're such a small country. And think about it, if you're a German company, you can sell to German market, that's a huge market. Then you can sell to other German-speaking countries, that's huge. Then you can sell even to French. And then you have your whole Europe. So you don't have to... In Israel, every startup is international. It has to look at global markets. So it has to be much more competitive right from the beginning. I'm talking too much. Come on, another question.
Okay, hello. I'm Aoife from the second year of Global Governance. And thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I was really curious to ask about your investments, because it was really striking to see the great difference in the percentages of the areas in which you accept these startup proposals. Because in 2019, you said you accepted 40%, last year a bit more, so it's more or less half of your proposals. And for example, I saw that like in software, health, medicine, and cybersecurity, you accept around 30% or 15% of the proposals. And then I noticed also how, for example, in food and agriculture and in general environment, water and energy, it was on 1%. So that's a great major difference between the sectors. And also going towards, you know, the 2030 agenda for the UN, I was wondering if you wanted to like explain or something, what's the reason to it, if it's for the proposals, for the quality of the proposals, So I was just curious to know that. Thank you.
Okay, first answer about this. Can you see it? So I think I didn't explain it very well. It's more in terms of how we spend our money. So if you look at all the private sector money that invests in different technologies, that's the light column. So about 1/3 of the money goes to software, right? When you look at our money, about 1/3 goes to healthcare. So this is not the approval rate, this is how the money is distributed among different sectors. Okay, does it make sense?
Yes, yes, thank you very
So
much.
when you look at agriculture and food, there is very little investment in this space, very few venture capitalists, so we spend much more. But in general, when we get proposals, so the number of proposals I showed you is, it has all the different sectors. Now, the second part of your question, can you say again?
Yeah, no, it was just regarding then how these startups and all can help for the arrival towards the 2030 agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN.
So, very good question and not a very good answer. I think Israel has been behind on the SDGs. You know, if you look at SDG is the Sustainable Development Goals that UN has declared. And we've done a lot of work in healthcare and in education, but everything to do with the environment, I think we could be doing much more. My personal goal for this year is to come up with a strategy on how Israeli industry can be much more active in those goals, especially in the environmental goals. So I think, you know, new technologies, I mean, who would think that technology can change the climate? But today you have companies that are changing the climate, right? So I think technology is going to be very instrumental towards the green world, towards the clean world. And we in Israel should be working harder at this. I think Europe is leading, and that's why you have all those amazing plans and putting a lot of money in this, and I think they're right. Not because it's very important for the environment, not just because of that, but also because that's where the big money is going to be made. So I think that's where everybody should be investing, and they're beginning to invest in impact. It's called impact investing, because impact goals or environmental goals, social goals, they will go together with economic success. That's my personal belief, and I think we're beginning to see that. So I think a lot of technology companies are going to go there, and it will be good for the planet, and it will be also good for them economically. Who else?
Tommaso.
Hi, I'm Tommaso Celani from the third year of Global Governance, and I had, let's say, two questions. The first one regards the startups and this kind of approach of your government. I wanted to know the percentage of startups that actually succeed after the initial funding round, and also has there ever been a political setback on financing those new initiatives that sometimes do not translate into actual companies, and so some of this money doesn't recirculate back inside the economy? While instead, I had another question, but I don't know if you can answer me. What do you think that is the discriminant factor that has led Israel to be the leading country in the vaccination for COVID?
I'll start with the second question, okay? Sometimes you don't know if the original intent, what the original intent was, but but looking back, you come up with ideas looking back. You know what I mean? So after something happens, you can come up with a lot of good reasons why it happened. But I'm not sure it's the original intent. So I think that what we say today is that we're a small country with one of the best healthcare systems. So we were able to vaccinate very quick. Quite, I think, over 2 billion people were already vaccinated, which is a big percentage. We also have a very digital healthcare system. So over 90% of Israeli citizens have digital records for 20 years, which is the best in the world for sure. So very digital, so it's very easy to follow on the results. So if you vaccinate, I just saw this morning some study that was published in Economist saying that out of few 100,000 people who were vaccinated, there was a reduction in the infection rate within 14 days. So this type of result is very easy in Israel because it's a small country, very digital, and we can get a lot of research done very quickly. It's not a clinical research, right? But just following the population. So after effect, people say that Pfizer was really keen to get this kind of information. I'm not sure that that was the original idea, but it's as good answer as any. In terms of how many startups succeed. So I'm not sure there are real numbers. It really depends on the stage and it depends on the type of startup, yeah. But the biggest problem is getting the initial funding. So there are a lot of companies that never get funded because their idea is not good, because they never found the right investor and so forth. Out of companies that get seed funding, the more you progress, the more chances of you succeeding. You understand that it's a simple economic principle, but the way it works is very simple. You know, when you're a young company, you have to decide, okay, I have limited funds. What is the right thing for me to do this year? And the right thing for you to do this year is to reduce your biggest risk. So if you think about your startup, let's say, and let's say you're creating a product, what is your biggest risk? Is it, will the market accept it? Is it needed? Is it, can I manufacture it at the right price? Is it, do I have the right channel? Do I know how to sell it to people? And so forth. So you have many risks. And the theory goes that you have to reduce your biggest risk. And by the way, do you know why most startups fail? Who has ideas? So if you look back at thousands of startups and you do statistics, what is the biggest reason startups fail? Anybody has ideas? Now I know I have to look at the chat. Why do most startups fail? Come on, guys. Poor management, no. They didn't take considerable risk, no. There is competition, no. Bankruptcy. One reason that's by far the biggest reason for startups to fail. Who said no market? Long-term funds is good, not being available, not network. Okay, so the people who said no market or product too late and so forth, let's translate it. Everything you said is right, and all of those are reasons for failure. But the biggest reason by far for startups failing is product market fit. So the product, they created a product that the market didn't want. It's hard to believe this, right? Because you'd think that's the first thing they did, go check the market. So most of them don't. A lot of companies don't do enough product market fit. They don't do enough analysis of the need for the product. And that's the major reason for failures. So when we evaluate proposals that come to us, one thing we look at is, did they do their market analysis? Did they validate the market? So we ask them, what is your market traction? That's a good one about the engineers and not economists. That's not bad. But you know, some very successful companies are led by finance people, and a lot of very successful companies are led by engineers. Biggest problem is market fit. Okay.
I have 4 questions and 12 minutes. Okay, so let's be quick.
So let's do those 4 and finish.
Arina.
Hello, thank you so much for your informative speech. My name is Irina. I'm a second-year student of global governance from Russia, and my question might be a bit narrow-scoped, but a few months ago I saw an article about the fact that the ultra-Orthodox population of Israel becomes more and more involved in tech startups workforce because of the nature of the jobs. My question is, do you think that tech startups might help to phase out the problem with involvement of ultra-Orthodox people in Israel in the workforce, and what can the public sector do to help integrate them better into the labor market? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm not going to go into the political aspects of this, of course. I will go into a different aspect. You know, I told you we have one of our biggest problem is getting enough human capital who can grow the high tech. It's actually not the problem this moment because there are quite a few people still on leave and unemployed, but very soon after coming out of the crisis, we're going back to the problem of not having enough engineers. And the reason we've been working very hard as a government, many different agencies, but also my agency, trying to get the Orthodox population involved, is not just to help them or not just to make some changes. The main reason is that we need them in the high tech. We need more people, and this population is not necessarily involved. It's not involved for many reasons, and it's not so easy to involve them. So sometimes their spiritual leaders don't want them to work, don't want them to join high tech. Sometimes it's because they don't have the, you know, they don't speak English. Very difficult to succeed in high tech without English. And there are many, they don't study mathematics. So the challenge is on how to bring unrepresented populations into technology world. Those are huge challenges, and they're not just, you know, in Israel. They're all over the world. So in Israel, we have very distinct group of people because they're religious, ultra-religious population. And you're right, a lot of them are beginning to join the workforce through a lot of hard work by many people, government and private. So you have to do education, you have to do training, you have to create different environments. So for example, ultra-Orthodox people will not work in the same room with the woman. So you have to create an environment where men can work separately, women can work separately. A lot of challenges, but it's actually happening. So I think it's we've learned a lot, and it's happening. And I will look at it from the high tech side. So I think it's going to help the Israeli high tech grow. I'm not going to relate to the political side of this.
Uyanga, you had a question? I saw Uyanga first, she had a question. I don't know if she has it still.
Okay.
She here still? No. Alex.
So how many Israelis are here in the audience? I see more. Anybody else? I guess not. Or they don't speak.
No, they're not here today, I think. No, Amor. Oh,
Yeah,
here-
because they don't care to hear somebody from Israel.
No,
they
no,
know.
okay, but they're
know it
working.
all
They're
already.
working. They're working. Uyanga, you're here. You had a question.
My question was already asked by Tommaso.
Okay, grazie. Alex.
Okay, good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Alex from India, and I'm a GT2 student. And I want to stress upon two problems I felt relevant for Israel as a startup nation, and your response or your opinion to both of them. One would be regarding an article I read a few months ago on the Tech Review, and it talked about how Israel faces a slowdown in new startups and a large number of startups actually closing from the period of 2014-17. So, I mean, I don't know the latest data, but in that time period. And then another problem was the increasing amount of dominance by multinational corporations in Israel, buying up startups, such as what happened in the case of Waze, which was one of Israel's startup child, and it was bought up by Google a few years later. And also the arguments brought up by many regarding the poaching of other startup employees, as in the case of Lemonade Incorporated, which was done by Amazon. So, what do you think? What steps are taken up by the Israeli government, or I mean, people in charge for such such a scenario in both cases, so that I don't know, there wouldn't be a future downside?
So many questions in one. So I will answer them, all three of them, real quick. So in terms of reduction in startups, yeah, there is a global trend of less seed rounds. In Israel, it has been more pronounced, probably because we had more startups to begin with. So in some cases, it's okay. In some cases, it's a problem. I launched yesterday a new seed funding program that my office is actually in my division, that's going to hopefully to increase the seed funding by the private sector, especially in high risk sectors. So what you read probably was something that we discussed, and it was in a context of the new program that we just launched. And actually, after we finish here, I'm going to be interviewed on television about this new program. So that's one. In terms of multinationals, there is a shift. So on the one hand, it's good to have a lot of multinationals present in the R&D, yeah? It's good because local people can work there and learn new technologies, learn new management approaches and so forth. It becomes difficult when, like the case you said about Amazon. So Amazon decided to open R&D center in Israel. They sort of went from 0 to 300 in no time by offering just very high salaries, okay? So that's not a very good thing for Israel because the salaries go up. On the other hand, it's a good thing because, you know, Amazon is a very innovative company and the things they do in Israel are very innovative and we can learn from that. So there's a balance. So it's not so good if all your people work for multinational companies. It's less good. And you know why it's not so good? Because if you only have R&D center, you don't have product, you don't have professional services, you don't have sales and marketing, you don't have manufacturing. So the number of people involved around this company is much less if you only have R&D. So we strive to develop complete companies that have many different departments. So it's good and bad. So we don't encourage opening multinational centers anymore like we did in the past. But of course, we also don't tell them don't come. Usually they buy a company and they grow the division in Israel through their acquisition. I think we're done. Professor?
No. There is
I'm sorry, I have a 12:30 meeting.
You have to run 1 minute, Francesca, 30 seconds. We have 11:28. 2 more minutes. Vai, Fra.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm from the third year of global governance. I just want to ask you a curiosity. What is, in your opinion, the most important need for customers in this difficult period with an open innovation and agile perspective, if you can give it? Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. It's, you know, it's the consumers who have to tell us. I don't know. Guys, I'm gonna stop, okay?
Yes, yes, let me just say.
Sorry.
Let me just say, Anya, that my generation has grown up on reading a book called Small is Beautiful by a great writer called Schumacher. And it's delightful to see that his book relevance never ceases to exist. And that actually we're now at a stage where institutions have been created to make that beauty in the ideas of people grow and be protected and be encouraged. And it was delightful to hear of the experience of an institution that has pushed forward this concept. Thank you so much. We look forward to having you in Rome. And at that point, it's not 1.5 hours. You're gonna be stuck with our students for at least 2.5 hours. It was really interesting.
Okay.
Microphones on, please, as it is tradition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
It's really know how to do all this. Take care.
Bye, Anya. Thank you.
Bye.
We can stop the recording. Thank you, guys. Great to see you all.